We have with us this morning political analyst and author of Founders Revolution, Michael Law. Michael, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
There was a belief of, in America in particular, that the Trump election was very similar to the Brexit election. Maybe not one and the same, but a lot of similarities there. Trump was very critical of British Prime Minister Theresa May's handling of the exit of the European Union. From your perspective, does that damage the relationship between America and its most steadfast ally, or was it something that was very much in the Trump mold of how he conducts himself as our president?
Yeah, that's very typical of President Trump, and I think it needed to be said because the election where they decided to exit is not actually being followed by Prime Minister May. And that was one of the points that President Trump was trying to make. It's more like a soft exit instead of the hard one that the Brits voted for. And by soft, what he means is, yes, they're cutting economic ties with the European Union, but they're not, under May, cutting the free movement or immigration ties. And, of course, that is one of President Trump's top priorities, not just for America, but that's something that he's always looked at as being important is those immigration policies. And the Brits voted for a hard cut from European Union, and Prime Minister May is just not doing that. And so he was critical of that. In fact, he said that Boris Johnson, who was a cabinet member under May, who quit because of this soft exit, would make a better prime minister. But it wasn't just that. Of course, NATO, they need to be spending a lot more than what they are. I mean, we're covering 2/3 of Europe's defense under NATO, and so it does need to be addressed, and President Trump has been doing that. Currently, of course, he's with Putin, probably just going over some of the deeds of Russia in the past, as well as the indictment against 12 Russian agents, which, of course, those agents will never turn themselves in, but at least he's got that over Putin's head, and probably be discussing that and working on relations there. And it is something that he does need to do, is have those kind of relationships, whether they're good or bad, but just have some way of communication, and this is a step in that direction.
Michael, when you talk about Theresa May and you talk about Brexit, it reminds me, and I think it shows clearly, that America's not the only country in the world with a political establishment, that there's a ruling class, a political class, a group of people who self-appointed themselves masters of the universe is the way I like to refer to those people. You don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball. But where are we in relation to Trump, Brexit, some other forces, anti-establishment forces? We or other countries electing populist governments or populist leaders. From your perspective, when you look at that, and I'm talking about the macro, that is the political establishment trying to preserve its current world order, and Brexit and Trump and some of these other leaders, whether they're populist or nationalist in nature, how do you see that? I mean, obviously nobody knows for sure, but from your perspective and your level of insight, how do you see that playing itself out?
Well, yes, the political, those that are in political power are going to try to maintain that at all costs. But I think we need to remind ourselves exactly what Thomas Jefferson said, which was always trust in the people. And in this case, with regards to Britain, they decided to exit the European Union, not just economically, but also with their free movement and immigration ties. And the people need to be listened to. So the people will only put up with, and that's not just Britain or Europe, it's also here, they'll only put up with a certain amount of abuses by government before they decide to take matters into their own hands. And eventually that will happen if even the political those in political power don't listen to us. And I think Trump is a step in that direction, saying, you need to listen to us. I know nobody liked President Trump except the people who elected him, and not the political powers, because the political powers, they just did not want President Trump. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. And there may be some political upheaval in Britain over May's soft exit rather than hard exit. So it remains to be seen, and I think it will come down to that.
My last question would be, when you talk of NATO, you talk of Europe, you talk of England in particular, you're talking to people who have similar values, a Western culture. When you talk about Putin, it's a little bit different. You're not talking about the leader of a country who shares the values and concepts of freedoms and liberties that most European countries do and America still ascribes to. What would be success in dealing with Vladimir Putin, a president who's very different, unconventional, does things in a very different sort of way? From your perspective, what's a good day in Helsinki for America and Donald Trump?
Well, I think a good day would be to show how strong the NATO ties are that America has, show how strong Europe is altogether, and that they can only put up with so much. In fact, NATO has expanded from what it originally was into some of the old Eastern Bloc countries taking part in NATO. So he's not going to have the hold that they used to have, and hopefully President Trump can get that across, that people like freedom. They like their political freedom, they like their economic freedom, and that Russia needs to move more in that direction. So if he can pull that off, that could go a long ways.
Michael, thank you for your time this morning. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.